When Wade Harlan rode into Bitter Creek and found his dead rival's twins sitting on a feed crate outside the livery, he almost kept going. The girl had her chin up, though her shoes were split at the toes, and the evening wind was lifting dust through the hem of her dress. The boy sat pressed against her side with both hands around a cracked tin cup, as if the little heat left in it might last longer if he held still enough. Neither child was crying. That was the part that struck Wade hardest. Crying belonged to children who still believed somebody was coming. Across the street, folks stood beneath Miller's awning pretending not to stare. Up the hill, the church bell had rung that morning for Jasper Rusk, and now the town had gone back to its business, as if one burial had spent all the mercy available that day. Jasper Rusk. Wade tasted the name like old blood. 10 years earlier, Jasper had cheated Wade's father in a horse sale, forged the paper, and watched the shame finish what fever had started. Since then, the two men had carried a hatred that needed no feeding because it had learned to feed itself. If the Almighty had wanted Wade Harlan to perform one last kindness tied to Jasper Rusk's name, he had picked a poor instrument. Then the little girl said to her brother, very calm, "Don't you let them see you beg." Her voice was too steady for 8 years old, like something in her had already turned from child to wire. Before we go farther, settle in wherever you are tonight and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. There is something good about knowing how far a story can travel after dark. Wade swung down from his horse. The girl watched him with gray eyes that might have been her father's if Jasper had ever looked at the world without spite in him. The boy looked too, but with more fear than fight. "You waiting on somebody?" Wade asked. "We were," the girl said. "Don't seem like anybody is waiting on us now. How old are you?" 8. The boy held up 6 fingers, frowned, then added 2 more. "He's 8 too," the girl said. "He gets mixed up when people stare." "Names." She hesitated, because children who have been handled roughly learn that names can be handles too. "Clara," she said at last, then touched the boy's shoulder. "And this is Owen. Where's your mother?" "Dead 3 winters." "And your father?" The whole street seemed to go quiet, waiting to hear how Jasper Rusk's daughter would say the thing everybody already knew. Clara did not blink. "In a pine box behind the church, and good evening to him." That startled a laugh out of Wade before he could stop it. She heard it and looked harder, trying to decide whether laughter made a man dangerous or merely strange. "What happened?" "They say his horse threw him in Devil's Cut," Clara said. "Mrs. Vale says there was judgment in it. Sheriff says dead is dead." Owen finally spoke, soft as cloth. "Mrs. Vale says we'll be split up tomorrow." Wade looked toward the mercantile awning, where the preacher's widow stood in full view of her own righteousness. "Split where?" Clara's mouth flattened. "She says I can scrub floors for her sister in Laramie, and Owen is quiet enough for mission school." Owen gripped the cup until his knuckles blanched. Wade should have left then and let lawful people do lawful things. Instead, he heard Clara say, almost to herself, "I can work. I just can't do it if they take him." That sentence went through him like barbed wire. "You eaten?" he asked. Neither answered. "Come on." Mrs. Vale called from the boardwalk. "Mr. Harlan, that isn't necessary." He did not turn. That's generally how necessary things arrive. Inside the diner, he bought them stew, bread, and milk sweetened with molasses. Owen ate like the bowl might vanish between spoonfuls. Clara tried to go slower, failed, and then looked angry with herself for being hungry where somebody could witness it. Wade pretended not to notice. Sheriff Bell came in while they were scraping the bottoms of their bowls. "Figured I might find them here," he said. "Then your figuring still works better than your timing." Bell sighed. "Wade, what's the plan?" The sheriff shifted, which told Wade enough before the answer came. "There's no bloodkin willing. We're trying for placement. By splitting them." Bell glanced toward Mrs. Vale, who had followed him in. "Temporary arrangements." Clara stood so fast her chair skidded. "No." Mrs. Vale folded her hands. "Child, nobody is asking. They ain't stray pups from different litters," Wade said. That shut the room. Bell lowered his voice. "You got a better answer?" It came out of Wade before he fully knew he meant it. "Yes. They come with me." Mrs. Vale gave a sharp little laugh. "You despise their father." Wade looked at the twins. "Their father's gone. That does not make you fit to raise children." "No," Wade said. "But it makes me less likely to hand them to people who talk about them like freight." Bell rubbed his jaw. "You mean for the night?" Wade felt the fork in the road open under his boots. A night would have been simple, kind enough to pass for goodness, short enough not to cost him his life. But Owen was still holding that cup like it was the only warm thing in the world, and Clara had turned her body half in front of him without knowing she'd done it. I mean, until the circuit judge says otherwise, Wade said. And if the judge has sense, longer. Mrs. Vale stared. You would raise Jasper Rusk's children out of principle. Wade's mouth hardened. No. At first I'm doing it because he'd hate it. The truth hit the room like a slap. Clara's face changed, just a little. Not fear. Worse. Recognition. Wade hated himself for saying it in front of her, but he had lied too prettily to himself for too many years. Better an ugly truth than a tender falsehood. Belle looked from Wade to the children and back again. You understand what you're saying? Yes. Then take them home before somebody kinder with worse intentions volunteers. That was the point of no return. Wade's ranch sat 3 miles north of town where the cottonwoods thinned and the prairie opened. The house was small, but the roof kept weather out, and the stove could warm iron if you fed it right. He lifted Owen into the wagon first. Clara climbed up by herself, proud even in exhaustion. For a while nobody spoke. Then Owen asked, Do horses sleep standing? Some do, Wade said. Seems lonely. Maybe they trust the ground less than they trust their legs. Owen thought about that the rest of the way home. At the ranch, Wade built the fire high, found 2 clean quilts, and fried bacon with potatoes because children ought to meet a new roof with the smell of supper in it. Clara offered to help. He handed her the plates. She dried each one after washing as carefully as if the job itself were proof she deserved the meal. Afterward, he showed them the room his sister had once used before she married south. You'll both have to make do in here. Clara touched the faded quilt. Owen picked up a little carved horse from the sill. Do you hit? Clara asked. Wade turned. She did not lower her eyes. Some men do. No. Do you drink mean? No. Do you send children into the cold for being loud? No. Only then did her shoulders drop an inch. That night, Wade lay awake on the settee outside their room listening to 2 kinds of breathing. Owen's quick and Clara's long, but never fully settled. Near midnight, she cried out once, a sound more like anger than fear. He heard Owen whisper, I'm here, and then the rustle of her reaching for him in the dark. By morning, Bitter Creek had turned them into a story. At the feed store, men said Wade meant to claim the Rusk land through the children. At the post office, women said it was only a matter of time before he beat Jasper out of them by habit. Wade heard all of it because small towns believe cruelty is less ugly when disguised as prediction. He kept the twins close. Clara learned the stove dampers on the first day and the chicken bins on the second. Owen followed Wade to the barn and watched him doctor a gelding's swollen leg. You ain't scared of being kicked? Owen asked. I am. I just do the work anyway. That seemed to impress him. By weeks in, there were signs of them everywhere. Small socks drying by the fire, a ribbon on the washstand, 2 extra spoons in the dishpan. The house felt less orderly and more alive, which turned out to be a fair trade. Then, on the 6th night, Wade woke to smoke. He was on his feet before he was fully awake. The smell came faint through the cracks around the front door. He grabbed the rifle, flung the door wide, and found the porch steps blackened where a bottle had shattered and burned itself out. No blaze now, just broken glass, a rag still smoldering in the yard, and hoofprints cut deep in the frosted ground. Behind him, Clara stood barefoot with Owen in one hand and the poker in the other. Her face was white in the lamplight, but her grip did not shake. Get your boots, Wade said. Both of you. Was it an accident? Owen whispered. Wade looked at the tracks. No. Morning brought the answer in a polished buggy with silver trim too fine for Bitter Creek roads. Horace Till, banker, land buyer, and the slickest vulture between Cheyenne and Casper, stepped down in gloves that had never touched an honest fence. Jasper Rusk had worked for Till on collections when paper failed to frighten debtors. Men like Till preferred to hire ugliness and later deny ever knowing it. Mr. Harlan, Till said pleasantly, I hear you've taken charge of an unfortunate domestic matter. If you came to offer sympathy, Wade said, you wore the wrong face. Till smiled. I came to make practical arrangements. Jasper left obligations. Notes. Contracts. Papers belonging to my office may have passed through his hands before his death. If the children have seen anything, I'm prepared to relieve you of the burden. Clara appeared silently in the doorway. Owen stayed behind her with one hand fisted in her dress. What kind of papers? Wade asked. Routine transfers. Creek bottom rights. Men's affairs. Clara spoke before Wade could stop her. Pa had papers in the flower bin when he didn't want folks finding them. Till's gaze sharpened. Wade felt it. So did Clara, who went still as a rabbit hearing wings. Till smiled at her. Bright girl. Wade stepped forward. Conversation's done. Till's pleasantness thinned. Bitter Creek is about to change. Rail survey has crossed the county line. Men who own the creek bottoms will be rich. Men who obstruct progress will be moved. Then I expect you've had a busy life, Wade said. Till pulled on his gloves finger by finger. See that the children remember anything useful. When he had gone, Wade turned to Clara. Not in anger. In fear. You never tell a man like that what you know. Her face hardened. I didn't know I knew anything. The anger left him at once. She was 8. And already learning that one wrong sentence in front of power could cost blood. I know, he said. That's on me. That afternoon they searched the flower bin and found nothing. Then Clara remembered another hiding place. Jasper had once sent her for tobacco from beneath a loose board in the shed. Wade pried it up at dusk. Under it lay an oilskin packet, a ledger, 2 deeds, and a short letter signed by Horace Till. Once the children are sent off, there will be no obstacle to transfer. Wade read it twice. Cold moved through him slow and clean. He took the papers to Sheriff Bell at once. Bell swore softly. This is enough to ask questions. No, Wade said. It's enough to make him dangerous. Danger did not wait long. 3 nights later, just as the sky was turning iron blue, Wade heard riders coming hard. He was chopping wood. Clara was reading aloud to Owen on the porch, sounding out each word with furious care. The moment Wade straightened, Clara read his face before he spoke. Inside, he said. They moved. For riders came into the yard with Till in the wagon behind them and Deputy Moran at his side, looking sick enough to confess already. Till called up pleasantly. I've come for stolen documents and the lawful heirs attached to them. Wade set down the axe and took up the rifle. You can leave with what you came in. Till's smile didn't reach his eyes. Do not make me rough in front of children. Then turn around. The first rider hit the porch at a run. Wade fired into the post beside him. Splinters burst. Horses danced. Clara snatched Owen and ran through the house as a second man vaulted the rail. Everything narrowed. A boot on wood. A fist. Wade driving the rifle, but into a jaw. Moran shouting that this had gone too far. Till ordering the children taken whole. The crash of a chair inside. The back door slamming. Wade got into the yard in time to see Clara on the old mule with Owen in front of her. No saddle. Only a halter rope. He had shown her once. Only once. How to ride bareback in an emergency. She remembered. The mule lunged north toward Willow Draw. One rider broke after them. Wade tackled him before he cleared the gate. They hit frozen ground hard enough to jar the world white. The man's knife flashed. Wade caught his wrist, felt the blade tear his palm, and slammed the hand against a stone until the knife fell free. Till stood by the wagon, no longer pretending to be civilized. Just watching, calm and cold, as though ordering violence and witnessing it were 2 separate moral acts. That was when Wade understood him fully. Till did not merely want land. He wanted a world where children could be moved like fence posts, and no one of consequence would call it evil. Ask yourself plain, Till said. Would you die for Jasper Rusk's blood? Wade rose, blood running off his hand. No, I'd live for theirs. Then he went through the yard like judgment. He put Moran on the ground with one punch and tore the revolver from his holster. He shot the trace line on Till's wagon team, sending the horses into a panic. He drove the last hired man behind the trough with splintering shots until Sheriff Bell came over the rise with 3 ranchers and enough anger to make numbers matter. Men broke fast once the law looked likely to stick. Moran confessed first. One of Till's riders followed. Till kept his mouth shut, but the ledger would speak soon enough. Wade did not stay. Willow Draw was north, and the dark was dropping. At the midpoint of all this, let me ask you something plain. If you had one chance to save yourself or keep faith with 2 children who had started to trust you, what would you choose? The draw was a hard place to search at sunset. All shale, scrub pine, and twisting creek bed. Wade found the mule first, reins tangled in sumac, flanks heaving. Then he heard Owen crying in the dark. They were down by the water. Clara had gotten the mule through the narrows, then slipped on the ice trying to pull Owen behind a fallen cedar. She was sitting up when Wade reached them, but blood had matted her hair at the temple and her hands were shaking so hard She had tucked them under her arms to hide it. "Did he get the papers?" she asked before anything else. Wade nearly broke at the sound of it. "No." "Good," she whispered. "Then I did one thing right." He knelt in the creek mud and took her face gently between his hands. "Listen to me. You do not have to earn being kept." Something in her gave way then. Not loudly. Just the smallest collapse, as if those 8-year-old bones had been holding up too much weather for too long. Owen crawled into Wade's coat, shivering. "I thought he'd take her." "He didn't. You came. There wasn't anywhere else in this world I was meant to be." That was the truth at last, and once Wade heard himself say it, there was no road back to the man he had been at the livery. Spite had opened the door. Love had already crossed the room and sat itself down by the fire. The doctor stitched Clara's head near midnight, while Owen slept against Wade's shoulder in the waiting room. Snow whispered at the windows. The whole place smelled of camphor and coffee gone bitter on the stove. When Clara woke, Wade was beside her bed with his bandaged hand in his lap. "You look awful," she said. I was about to say the same. Her mouth twitched. Then the courage left her face, and what remained was only a little girl worn through. "Did you mean it?" "What?" "That thing by the creek." Wade looked at the blanket. "I first brought you home for an ugly reason." She waited. "Part of me wanted to shame your father in the grave. Wanted to prove I could do right by what he never managed." He swallowed. "That part of me is a smaller man than I hoped to become." Clara looked past him to Owen sleeping in the chair. "Pa would hate that you said it plain." "I know." He hated owing anybody goodness. Wade nodded. She was quiet a long while. Then she said, "I kept thinking if I stood still enough and did every chore right, maybe he'd stop being angry at the world when he looked at us." Wade had heard many sad things in his life. Few landed harder than that. "What grown folks fail to give," he said softly, "is no measure of what a child deserved." Clara turned her face away, but not before he saw tears gather there. Owen woke just enough to lift his head. "You still here?" "Still here." He settled again, voice blurred by sleep. A body ought to be able to rest where he's wanted. No one in that room forgot the line. If this story is reaching you tonight, then it was written for exactly that place in the heart. A like and a subscribe help us keep telling stories where quiet goodness gets to win. The hearing was held 3 days later in the church because half of Bitter Creek wanted to see a rich man answer plain. Judge Pomeroy came in on the noon stage, read the letter, read the ledger, and lost whatever appetite he had for delay. The records showed Till had been buying debt-strangled claims all through the creek bottom, using Jasper to pressure holdouts into selling before the rail survey became public. The Rusk tract sat at the center. With Jasper dead and the twins scattered, Till could have taken it for almost nothing. Deputy Moran testified first, pale and sweating. One rider testified next to save his own neck. Then Clara stood with a bandage around her head and said, clear enough for every bench to hear. He smiled when he talked about sending us away. Men who smile that way are already hurting somebody. Till's lawyer called it childish fancy. Clara answered, children know the look of trouble sooner than grown folks do. We have to. A murmur moved through the church like wind through dry corn. When Wade testified, he kept it simple. The fire on the porch, the letter under the shed, the attack on the ranch, the chase to Willow Draw. The truth did not need much decoration. Wickedness had already left fingerprints on half the county. Then Owen asked to say one thing. Judge Pomeroy hesitated, but the boy was already walking forward with the cracked tin cup in both hands. This was at the livery, he said. Mr. Harlan bought us warm milk in it because ours was cold. He set the cup on the table in front of Till. You can keep the cold part. We ain't taking it anymore. That was all. Yet the room changed around it. Some stories turn on gunfire. Some turn on a child refusing to be afraid in public 1 minute longer. By sundown, the judge ordered Horace Till held for conspiracy, attempted abduction, arson, and fraud. His local accounts were seized. The rail company, smelling scandal and prison both, withdrew its private agreements. The Rusk land passed into trust for Clara and Owen until they came of age. And Wade Harlan was granted full guardianship effective immediately, with Sheriff Bell and the schoolmistress as witnesses. Justice did not arrive gentle. Till was let out of the church in irons while every debtor he had ever cornered watched from the steps. His buggy, his office, his ledgers, his fine gloves, his borrowed dignity, gone. He looked smaller than he had on Wade's porch. Power often does when the room quits kneeling. Outside, Bitter Creek rearranged itself around the new truth. Mrs. Vale approached first, face pinched by the effort of humility. "I was wrong about the children," she said. Clara, who had every right to be sharp, only answered, "Yes, ma'am. You were." Sheriff Bell laughed into his hand and pretended it was a cough. Men at the feed store tipped hats to Wade. Women from town sent pie, socks, and books enough to bury a child in stories. Owen accepted the socks with suspicion and the books with reverence. Clara accepted everything as though the world might still change its mind by morning. On the ride home, she sat beside Wade and watched the prairie slide gold under late light. "Are you going to make us change our name?" she asked. "No." "Why not?" "Because it's yours to keep or lay down when you're grown, not mine to strip." She looked ahead a long time. "I might keep part of it and lose the sorrow." "That sounds about right." At the ranch, Wade spread the trust papers on the kitchen table after supper. The lamp made a small pool of gold across the ink. "These keep the land in your names," he said. "Nobody sells it till you say. Nobody uses it to own you. Not ever again." Clara touched the seal. "You could have taken it." "No." Owen frowned. "Why not? Folks take things all the time." Wade looked at both of them. The healing bruise, the patched sleeves, the fierce little hope trying not to show itself too soon. "Because love that keeps score is just another kind of debt," he said. "And I won't build this house on debt." Owen considered that with preacher seriousness. Clara only stared, and Wade understood she had been waiting her whole life for a grown voice to say something that did not turn into a demand 2 breaths later. "What are we to you then?" she asked. He had no polished answer, only the one truth that mattered. "You are my children if you'll have me," he said. "And if that sounds too large tonight, then start with this. You are wanted here, and that is not changing with the weather." Owen moved first, climbing into Wade's side with all the trust he had been saving. Clara came slower, because hers had cost more to keep alive. But when she laid her head against his shoulder, Wade felt the last of the old hatred leave him for good. Jasper Rusk was in the ground. There was no more use feeding bitterness to a dead man. The living were here. The living were warm. The living needed him better than revenge ever had. Spring came late, and then all at once. Snow pulled back from the fence lines. Calves wobbled into the world. Clara learned sums from the schoolmistress and wrote them on slate by the stove. Owen planted beans in rows so crooked they looked almost artistic and spoke to the hens as if diplomacy might improve their laying. Wade fixed the porch, added a 3rd chair, and built a narrow bookshelf beside the window because books had begun arriving faster than the children could read them. By June, Bitter Creek no longer said Jasper's twins when speaking of them. Folks said Wade's young ones, and if there had been surprise in it at first, it softened with use. Some evenings the 3 of them rode out to the creek bottom tract that had almost been stolen. Clara wanted a school there one day. Owen wanted an orchard. Wade wanted whatever future let them stand on that land without fear in their bones. Years later, people would say the remarkable thing was that Wade Harlan raised his rivals, orphans, out of spite and ended by loving them like blood. But that was not quite true. Spite carried him as far as the gate. The children did the harder miracle. They trusted him before he deserved the honor, and in doing so taught him that some of the Lord's best mercies arrive wearing the face of a burden you nearly refused. On a warm summer evening, with Owen laughing by the pump and Clara reading aloud from the porch steps while the last light turned the fields to honey, Wade looked at the home Noise had built around him and understood a simple thing at last. The heart is not healed when it forgets its wounds, but when it finally has something dear enough to protect instead. Beyond the yard, the cottonwoods shivered silver in the sunset, while the porch lamp came softly alive behind them. Next time, we'll tell the story of the widowed midwife who took in a handcuffed outlaw during a blizzard and discovered by dawn that the man everyone feared had been carrying a child's Bible in his coat the whole way west.